like to call the order of the Milan Area Schools Board of Education regular meeting for Thursday, October 27th, 2022. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, good evening. Thank you to everyone who is here. Thank you to everyone who is watching online. All board members are present this evening. Thank you. Our first order of business is public comments. And just a reminder, this meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public meeting. There are 2 times for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. When addressing the board, you'll be asked to state your name. The board determines the amount of time granted to individuals or groups to speak. Each person shall be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. I will give you a 30-second warning, and I'll ask you to finish your thought when the timer goes off. Board members may question speakers but are not obligated to answer questions or make statements or commitments in response to issues raised by the public. In general, such items will be referred to the superintendent for advisement, investigation, study, and/or recommendation, or designated as future agenda items for board consideration. Are there any students who would like to address the board? Is there any public members that would like to address the board?
Good evening, Andrea Bennick, and I want to thank you guys for the opportunity to give an update on the latest WISD PAC meeting that was held on October 18th. The PAC is looking to fill representative vacancies, and Milan still has 1 vacancy. A couple more seats were filled by Dexter, and Ann Arbor is in the process of filling their seats with incoming parents as their current representatives are aging out of the program. Each district has their own process for filling these seats. If anyone has connections with families with students with an IEP in Milan or other WISD districts, please encourage them to consider becoming a PAC representative. A strong PAC has a diverse representation within the WISD, and it allows for a more complete input from the PAC when advising on special education initiatives and policies, and that advisement then helps to serve the various populations of our own district as well. The bulk of the last meeting was spent brainstorming strategies for connecting with our local districts about filling those representative seats. We reviewed the bylaws of the PAC, and we are setting priorities for the upcoming months. The PAC is working to update the WISD Parent Handbook, which is available online at www.washtenawisd.org. It's within the Parent Advisory Committee tab under Resources. The PAC hopes to have an updated handbook to share with our districts to distribute to families that gives them a solid resource guide to the particulars of special education in our county. The PAC is also working on redefining how a representative works together with the WISD and the local district. Historically, unfortunately, the PAC has had a more adversarial connotation. Ideally, rebuilding the PAC with the intention of collaboration within these entities will help foster successful communication and stronger special education services within the district, thereby serving families and students well. I was able to meet with Lon Smith following our PAC meeting, and I have standing meetings with him monthly following the PAC meetings. The purpose of our meetings is to foster partnership and communication from the PAC and the WISD to our district. At our meeting, Mr. Smith shared with me some of the initiatives and details of Milan's special education community. I'm thankful I had the opportunity to learn more about how Milan provides an education for these students. I look forward to our meetings and continuing to grow the partnership with WISD, Milan area schools, and the families we serve. Along those lines, I welcome hearing from our community how Milan area schools serves your students with IEPs, from our youngest learners in early on to our young adults in the young adult program. I envision my role as a PAC representative as a liaison between the families of the district, Milan area schools, and the WISD. Learning about how families receive services from the district and interactions with the district will inform me on the strengths of our programs and where more support and training is needed. This valuable information will help inform the PAC on how to advise the WISD on any upcoming special education policies and initiatives that they may recommend. I can be found on Facebook as Andrea Everts Benning, where you can private message me, or you can email me at Andrea Benning, B-E-N-N-I-N-K, pacrep@gmail.com. And Mr. Gearbaugh, you're welcome to share that information in your next Scoop Out communication. I look forward to hearing from our community as we build a stronger partnership in special education in Milan area schools. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Bennick, and thank you for your continued service on that committee. We appreciate it. Are there others?
Good evening, Board. Kirk DeMars. It's been a little while since I was able to be here. So there's, I guess, a few things that I wanted to, voice my concerns about. Not to go into, I'm not going to read anything to you, but I'm very concerned about the sexually explicit materials that are in books in our library as well. But I think what concerns me more is our response. I took 3 notes that I saw as responses, treating it like it wasn't a big deal. And if that's the case, if it really is not a big deal, the explicit, things that are in these books, whether it be pictures or, written content, then why has our current play had to make edits because of language that was in the play for the performance? Secondly, a concern of mine is doubling down that it's actually good for the students. I bet if an adult walked into Wilson Park here in town with one of these books, especially the ones with pictures in them, and shared this with other community members that are minors, that person probably would not be viewed as a positive influence. Thirdly, at least, and maybe this is my understanding of the timing of things, but seeing that a form was sent out to parents to be able to submit, to be able to see their students' rental history. I think that's great. That's something that we probably should have had long ago. That should have been something that parents could have had access to anytime their student rented something, they saw what they rented. However, in response to the parents' concerns at this time, I don't think that's enough. I don't think that's enough of a response. It doesn't solve the parents' concerns for the content-related things that are in there. For one instance, if you're a parent that doesn't consent to your child renting that kind of material, that doesn't mean that another child that does get consent from their parents in the schools could rent that material and then share that throughout the day with their friends. So there's holes in a lot of these responses that I'm concerned about. And I want to be clear, and I think a lot of other people that have raised concerns are in the same boat as me. I'm not asking for a burning. I'm not asking for a banning. I think it's quite okay for these books to be in our Milan public library, outside the walls of our schools. If parents want to take their kids there and rent that material with their children, that's great. But within the walls of our schools, I think that's a huge concern that you guys are okay with providing that kind of content. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Mr. DeMars. Are there others? All right, thank you for your comments this evening. Next up on the agenda is I need a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of October 12th, 2022.
Motion by Rosenleacher.
Support by Kiger.
It's been moved and supported to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of October 12th, 2022. Discussion.
Minor point. Oh,
don't know if I'm on. Minor point, Mr. Sislo.
Yes.
Mrs. Tousley's name is misspelled. I don't know if we can edit that relatively without having to do a major redo or.
No, we can, Ms. Frey has pointed out that Ms. Tousley's name is spelled incorrectly. Under the attendees or
Under the signed-in guests.
signed-in guests? Okay. We can make an amendment to make that correction. Are there others? Do your motions still stand with the correction? Ms. Rosenleacher
Yes.
and Ms. Kiger?
Correct.
So I have a motion, and I have a motion that's seconded to approve the minutes with the correction of Ms. Tousley's name at the regular meeting of October 12th, 2022. Ms. Heike?
Heike, yes. Kiger,
Yes.
Macchio,
Yes.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Pharaoh,
Yes.
Freight.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Next up in our strategic objective for finance and operations, I need a motion to accept the 2022 annual audit as presented in attachment A.
Moved by Pharaoh.
Support by Macchio.
It's been moved and supported to accept the 2022 annual audit as presented in attachment A. As a reminder, we received a presentation for the audit from the principal, Dan Clark, at our last meeting as a first reading of the audit. We've had time to review the audit and ask Mr. Gearbaugh and the finance office for any questions or clarifications regarding the audit. Are there any other concerns or questions of the audit at this time? Thank you for coming this evening, Krista. We appreciate it. You are welcome to go home after this vote if you would like. So it's been moved and seconded to accept the 2022 annual audit as presented in attachment A. Ms. Heike?
Kiger,
Yes.
Macchio,
Yes.
Rosenleacher,
Yes.
Sislo,
Yes.
Pharaoh,
Yes.
Freight,
Yes.
Heike, yes. Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you very much. Next up on our agenda is we're going to have a presentation by Assistant Superintendent Mr. Ryan McMahon regarding the Section 98C Learning Loss Board presentation. We have a copy of that, but we'll go ahead and sit in the audience to watch this presentation.
I can assure you there's nothing on the slides that's not in front of you.
Oh,
Your choice.
we're already headed down. We'll go ahead.
All right. Good evening. You guys hear me okay? Okay. It's my pleasure to present to you tonight some information about a new grant. I cherish the opportunity to share grant information with you, and rest assured I do have more to come later tonight. But this time I got to actually present to you about a grant. And Mr. Sislo, you excused Krista. She is the right hand when it comes to grants, so pressure's on now because I got to get it right because she's not here to check. She'll check me tomorrow. But so this grant is being called Mitigating Learning Loss. It's from Public Act 144, Section 98C. You've been hearing a lot of 98B before. That was our achievement goals, which I'll talk about a little bit. In a nutshell, what this comes down to is the federal government gave the states a lot of money, and they've been doling it out over the last 3 years, but they didn't dole enough of it out. And so legislators are now scrambling to get this money into the hands of schools, and MDE is then scrambling to respond with the rules of the grants. And one of the grants that's been released is this Section 98C that we're calling Learning Loss Mitigation, and then MDE put the rules forth. One of the rules they put forth was to present to your Board of Education prior to the end of October, so that's on Monday. There's no requirement for meaningful consultation that we had to do for ESSER 2 and 11T funds, but we took that into consideration when we made our decisions on this grant, because I'm going to show you how we're going to spend the money. So in those decisions, we used the meaningful consultation from ESSER 3 and 11T. We made those decisions based on that. So we sort of encompassed that even though they didn't ask for it. This is just a checkbox here to show you what we intend to do with the funds, even though it's already been passed through our lens of meaningful consultation. So one of the things that they obviously want you to do is look at the data to make some database decisions as to why, how you're going to use these funds to specifically address learning loss. So what I'm sharing up here is actually 98B, the requirement for achievement data. This is the end of the year. We already shared with you earlier this year the framework for the goals, and I'll show the goals later, but the template will be updated throughout the year. We'll present to you in February, and then again in June, it will be filled in like this. This is the presentation from last June, or a piece of it. And just showing our NWA, that's what our goals are based on and the growth there. So we offer intervention in form of reading and mathematics at both Paddock and Simon, specifically around these with these grant funds. And part of the reason why is because of our performance on our NWA data. Not only does it tell us where our overall achievement goes, but it tells us specifically in what areas. The question? Yes, these are our scores. Yep. I'll show the goals at the end. And the goals are real simplistic. We kept it that way on purpose. But the reason I wanted to show you this a little bit is because the last full year of school we had before this was 2018-19. That wasn't interrupted by COVID, so we had 3 sessions of NWA. And interestingly enough, if you look just right across the top, the all student data, so you look in the fall, 198 in reading, 197 in math, those were both below fall of 2018-19 in that same area. So if we put this chart and just transpose 18-19 on it, those scores were lower here than they were in 18-19. Obviously an impact of the pandemic and the results, and so our kids had some learning loss overall. Interestingly enough, we grew. You can see in the winter we grew there by 5 and 10, and then by 5 and 6 into the spring. And by the spring, those scores, and we talked about this a little bit in June, I'm just highlighting this, the reading scores are actually higher than they were in 18-19, so we have more growth in reading this year, well, the last year than 18-19, the last full year, and math is just below. So we almost caught up with 18-19 in math. Even though there shows more growth in math than reading here, that's normal. That normally happens at, this is, I should say Simon's, yeah, grade 3 through 5. That's normal. There's more growth in math. We just surpassed 18-19 and almost got there in reading, and almost got there in math too. So we decided to specifically target this, our intervention towards math and reading. As you know, we have 2 reading interventionists at Simon's, and we have a math interventionist at Simon's as well, and I'm going to talk about how this funding is going to impact that. Currently, at Simon's, we are focusing on math with these funds. Currently, we have some supports in place already. Math win time, we have 2 sections of win time at Simon's. WIN stands for what I need, and we have it in reading, we have it in math, and what we do is we break out during the math instruction time, and we involve our math interventionists and our support staff, and we can break out in small groups, so where our teachers have small groups, and also the interventionists are taking small groups, and they're targeted, so they might be our lowest students, they might be seen by the interventionists, or we actually target up a little bit, our highest of the lows, we call them, and we rotate that throughout the year. So that's in place, we've had that for a couple years now, and we still support that. Morning math support just got started, and that's essentially tutoring before school. We offer that 3 mornings per week. Our students can either be dropped off an hour early by their parents, or ride the secondary bus in. Some of them do that and get dropped off at Simon's for some support. You probably heard a little bit of the debate this week between the gubernatorial debate about tutoring, right? Everybody's supporting this idea of tutoring. Well, that's what that is, and win time is also in that same lens. And then another supplement that we bought the teachers last year, and again this year, is it's an online supplement that the teachers can use, and it's called Reflex and Frax. One of the things we saw in our M-STEP, our dynamic score reports, and in our NWA data is our students struggle a little bit in fractions and basic math facts. So we bought some programs that they can use to supplement the everyday math curriculum. It's not like in lieu of, it's just an addition to. So those are in place, so those are our current supports. And then, based on our data, we added the math interventionist last year using some at-risk funds. And to support that program, we purchased a program called Bridges Math Intervention. And our math interventionists at Simon's and at Paddock have both been trained, and they both use that. It offers a screener test and then diagnostic lessons based upon screener scores. Our plan with these funds is to support the math interventionist position. One really great thing about the rules around these ESSER funds is they allow what's called supplanting. That's not normal in federal grants. You can supplement your programs, but you can't supplant, which means replace. Well, here they specifically say you can. And in the meeting for this, they said, yeah, you certainly can supplant. So what that means is we can take the 98C funds, pay our math interventionists, and push our at-risk funds off because you can carry over at-risk funds. So that's good because we are really spending down our at-risk funds aggressively now, and down the road, if that doesn't get supported with additional funds, that could run out. So if we're able to defer these off using this grant, that's what we intend to do. Question? Well, probably just 1 year. Yeah, it's supposed to be 1 year, but we also don't know how much it is. So that's the catch-22. Likely it's not going to be enough to cover the full amount of our math interventionists, but it could be really close. Part of the reason why we don't know is they set up 1 year, yes. They set aside a block of funds, and it depends on, and there's a per pupil amount, but it depends on who applies for it, who meets all the criteria and gets approved. Then you get your amount. So I'm estimating somewhere between, I would say, 60,000 and maybe 110. But we'll see. But that's the ballpark for us. What we can do is we can supplement salary there, so that's what that will go for. And Paddock Elementary also has a math interventionist, and we're using 11T funds to support that. So we're also pushing those at-risk funds for that position another year. In the future, a couple things we plan to do is, one thing we've done is implementing the Listening to Learn program, and I purchased this for our math interventionist, and it's it's a cool program. It's cost-effective. It's like maybe $100, and it's like a coaching software, and it's really gears on how the interventionist or the teacher, but in this case our interventionist, listens to the students while they're learning math. Have the student explain as like targeted questioning and then targeted listening. So it's kind of cool. So it's to help you diagnose how you instruct it. When I watched it, it looks to me like really great instruction, so it's good coaching. So our interventionist is going to try it this year, and then we'll see. If it's something we want to scale up, maybe we can do it ourselves, or maybe we purchase more. We don't know yet how that works, but we're going to give that a try this year. And another thing we've talked about, potentially with at-risk funds or maybe even general funds, is seeking some everyday math training, because we have a lot of new staff that weren't around. I wasn't even around when we bought Everyday Math. So we are going to explore some training options for them. So there's just additional supports that we might put in place around math learning loss support. When you go to measure impact of these programs, and I'm going to talk about how we're going to do it in a second, but it's going to be based on our goals. Mrs. Freight just asked the question, are those the scores or goals? These are the goals. And for Simon specifically, it's to grow 4 RIT points in each of the areas, reading and math, between the fall assessment and then the winter assessment in the spring. We did meet those goals last year. I have no reason to believe we won't meet them this year. I think we'll be even stronger. So that's what we're using to measure. That's our benchmark assessment. It's really simple because we use it for 98B. It's a requirement. We have those already posted on our website because you're supposed to post the goals here, and it suffices a category for 98C, and I think most districts are probably doing the same thing. I would have to do some digging to answer that question. Yeah. The scores that I have only show our scores, not comparative. I can get that for you. But the question was just, how does this compare to our peer groups? And I don't have that data in front of me. We can find it. They're norms. The NWA is nationally normed, so you can find the percentiles easily, so we can get that. And then another piece of this, and this is a really important piece, and it's critical in the grant world that we do what's called program evaluation. That's always been a requirement, but the restrictions around it have been really loose. What that means is anytime you're funding something with federal or state dollars, whether it's a section dollars or federal funds, you should be doing a program review. Is it working? Like that's kind of the point, was we're giving you this extra money to supplement your programming. Is it working? Now you can use it to supplement or supplant, but it's the same process. So how are you going to check? Well, we're going to check with the NWA data. We're going to look specifically at the students that were served by your interventionist compared to students who were not served by the interventionist and check their growth. And we are fortunate enough that we've already had practice at this 1 year. And I can share with you that last year the NWA growth in mathematics, the students that were served by your interventionist grew more than the students that were not. The impact was much greater at 3rd grade than it was at 5th grade, but the overall average of all 3 grades is that they grew more. So we know it's working. So we're just going to continue to push and hopefully get it to grow even more. I will be meeting with, or continue to be meeting with the principal and the math interventionist assignments for updates, just how's it going. We talk a lot about selection criteria, if we're using like a Z-score sorting of how we identify the kids will be targeted, and then how win time is working, the scheduling of that. We review that often, but specifically we'll be doing it quarterly and noting that, so I can share that with you at the end of the year. And then when the data comes out, you'll be seeing it here in February and then in June, but then I'll give a specific, I don't know if it'll be part of that same presentation or a different one, but I'll specifically share with you how this program impacted our students that received the intervention. Yes. And that concludes it for me, so we can do questions. Carrie. I'm sorry, Mrs. Macchio. I can get that for you. I want to say it was 150. I have that in a spreadsheet here. No, just at Simon's. Yeah. And some of the students repeat. You know, they might do intervention twice. We try to rotate as many as we can, but some repeat. I'm sorry, if they were. Yeah. Yeah, yes. Yep, we have a lot of ways to do that. One of the IDEX software we have pulls out individual scores. We can pull that real quick. Well, we're using at-risk funds and Title II funds for the literacy coaches and the literacy interventionists. We have 2 interventionists in literacy at both buildings and a coach in both buildings. So there's a lot of wraparound supports for literacy kind of baked in before the pandemic. We've added the interventions there, and now we've added math. And we're trying to scale that up. Mrs. Freight talked about middle school. We're trying to get into the reading intervention world at middle school, and eventually I'd like to have math as well. We have small programs. It's not full-time yet. Thank you for your time. I don't want to trip anybody. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. McMahon. Next up on our agenda, we're going to look at our strategic goal of the learning environment and culture. As many of you are aware, we did have a high school lockdown, and Mr. Gearbaugh invited some guests, our Detective Sergeant Eric McLaughlin and Milan Chief of Police Don Tillery, to speak in regards to that. I don't know if you wanted to start off with something, Mr. Gearbaugh, and we can go from there.
We just felt that it would be beneficial. I provided a summary of the event that evening, later in the evening on that Monday, but we felt that it would be beneficial to have the Milan Police Department come out, and Detective Sergeant was the lead person on site during the event, and obviously Chief was manning from his office in case anything needed to be addressed with other outside agencies. So I just thought it would be good for the community to hear from our Milan Police Department kind of how the situation was handled and a little bit of the detail with what we can share from that agency as well as from the district.
Good evening, School Board. How are you? I'm going to go over just some quick facts real quick. The basic numbers are that we received a call at 13:01. They were dispatched at 13:01. Officers arrived on scene at 13:09 and we cleared at 16:39. So about 3.5 hours on scene. Before I go into the what we did that day, I want to back up for a minute. I talked about the relationship between the Milan Police Department and the Milan area schools. This goes back almost 7.5 years ago when I first got here. This year marks my 40th year in law enforcement, and I have never had a closer relationship with a school superintendent than I do with Mr. Gearbaugh. The school and the school superintendent, the school system, and the police department work very closely together. All of my officers, with the exception of the 4 that two graduated about a month ago from the police academy and 2 are still in the police academy. With the exception of those 4, we meet with Mr. Gearbaugh on the summers, our vacations, our holiday breaks, and each one of my officers is personally walk through every corner of every one of these schools to familiarize themselves with them. The ones that are graduating, when we get them on board, that'll occur too. Our school resource officer has daily interactions with everybody in every school, and certainly the feedback I've received from our school resource officer is he is a benefit to both the police department and the school system. Yearly, we do our emergency operation plan review. The superintendent and myself, we go over the plan and we update it every single year. With the training, my department does specialized training on how to respond to school shootings or critical incidents. Yearly and sometimes bi-yearly, we conduct that training. I got a call from Mr. Gerbaugh that said he had a threat written on a girl's bathroom in the high school. Detective Sergeant McLaughlin responded. He was the command officer on scene. Mr. Gerbaugh and I spoke. I concur that a soft lockdown was the way to go in this particular situation. So when the officers arrived on scene, we had help from other departments as well as our fire department and Huron Valley Ambulance. Students were in a soft lockdown. We called bomb dogs in from neighboring jurisdictions, and these are specific kinds of dogs that can detect what's called vapor weight, and that is the kind of dog you need to detect ammunition, whether it be in a locker, on somebody's person, or in a car. We searched the entire school, the entire backpacks of every student, and every car. Both dogs hit on one car. We searched the car. We found no ammunition in there. I would suspect that perhaps that family may be hunters. The investigation continues on our side. After we gave the all clear, both that day and several times since then, the superintendent and my office and my staff have had after action reports, and we have already came up with recommendations on how to do it better next time. And every time we have one of these, we will have recommendations on how to do it better the next time. Does anybody have any questions? Appreciate your time. If you guys ever have any questions at all, certainly the superintendent knows how to get a hold of me. I'm right at the police department every day, 439-1551. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming this evening. Next up on the agenda is the Washtenaw Association of School Board Legislative Agenda Recommendation discussion. We had some quick discussion about this at our last meeting. This comes from Ms. Freight, so I'll let her speak to it some more so that we can have a discussion in regards to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sislo. So as many of you know, I think I brought it up in our board comments, I am the LRN representative on the Washtenaw Area School Board Executive Board and our representative over at the ISD. With the new board, because we elected a couple of different officers, and with Naomi Norman's recommendation, the hope is to be a more active board and a more proactive with the help of all of our districts. We have 9 districts through our ISD, and the hope was to come back to our districts as your rep and on the exec board and ask us to come up with a collaborative list of what we think are our needs so that we can go back and confer with all of the districts and see how we can better join forces to go and talk to our representatives before they come, and as is in the past, they come to us with what they think is important and tell us, and we come back and report to you. The hope is to be able to go to them and say, this is what we, as an ISD, all 9 districts, firmly hope to accomplish, and what we see as a need, can you do something for us, versus them saying, this is what we think we should do for you. And the hope in doing that is to be able to communicate to all of our boards and find out what do our 9 districts think are our needs. what are we looking at? What do, with a couple of the suggestions were trying to find a collaborative effort with like the staff shortage. Instead of worrying about who's poaching who, how do we think creatively to work together with busing, driver staff shortages, parapros, our substitutes. One of the suggestions from YPSI was, potentially making, having, again, we'd have to have the legislatures help us with this, but making it easier to live in our different communities as far as housing costs and things, as kind of like a incentive, if you will, to work in our district and to come and be here, because as we know, the starting teacher wage is not the greatest, and with housing costs is right now, it's incredibly difficult to find appropriate housing to match with your income and things. So the hope is, again, to be collaborative and work with our full board to find out what does Milan need. I will then take those concerns to the WASB, present those on the board. Currently, right now, we have a gentleman from Lincoln, Ypsilanti, myself, and Ann Arbor. Jessica is our representative. However, she is not running again. Her term is up at the end of December, so we will be electing a new president. And once we've done that, I'll be able to inform you as to who that is. I don't believe that will take place per the bylaws of the exec board until either January or February, once the new members are elected and the delegates decide who they're going to propose to run. But just in the interest of transparency, right now, that's on the exec board, but obviously there's representatives from each one of our districts that will be there to, again, collaboratively go together and try to be more of a force, if you will, to reckon with to our legislators and say, this is what we would like you to focus on. So I'm just kind of hoping and asking if anyone has any. I think Mrs. Heike had mentioned safety as one of an obvious concern with our officers here and what happened last week. It's one that is very much so already has been brought up by the 6 of us that were there discussing it. And if there are any others, that's what I believe Andrew and I are trying to hope to see what everyone thinks. So again, I can go and properly represent our board.
One of the things that I think would be something to consider, especially for the rural districts, would be broadband access. The fact that we had to provide the hotspots to some of our constituents. Obviously, we wanted to provide them, but is there some type of borrowing, some togetherness power that we can get to in regards to that, or just increase broadband access to those areas that the students that need it in order to do their homework or access things that they need that they're doing at school or teachers are asking them to do at home.
I would say 2 things. First, on the broadband access piece, I think it's not just an access issue, it's an affordability issue as well, because we all know what our internet bills are like, but if you have multiple children who are having to access the internet at the same time, you can't just have the bare bones, internet access. So I think that it's also an affordability issue for some people as well. On the safety side, I would be an advocate of telling the legislature that we don't just need more money for more drills. We don't need, more time for more drills and more training. We need real solutions to the violence problems that we're facing, or the safety issues that we're facing. And so I think that we need some, at the very least, I think we need some additional help with some mental health, being able to provide mental health access to our students. I think we've all heard anecdotally how difficult it is to find those services for students, particularly if you're a parent and you're just, trying. And so I think there needs to be a focus on that as well. But whatever the safety focus is, it can't just be more drills, more training. Our kids clearly understand, our teachers understand how to do that. We've done a lot of that over the years. So I think it has to be something more than that.
I also think we need to look at continued and sustained funding from the state for our at-risk learners. These grants are wonderful, but when they're short-term, one-time things, they're not long-term fixes. And what we've seen because of the pandemic is having a profound long-term impact on learning. So I think the state needs to get behind that.
And then one of the things that was clearly identified by our stakeholders in the last survey and that we've heard here at the board meeting as well is bullying. I know Mr. Jasper just had what do we call it? I forgot.
Assembly.
The assembly at the middle school. Blew my mind. It's had an assembly at the middle school, but obviously, you know, assembly here or there is not going to solve the issue of bullying, and I'm sure it's something that is common across many of the districts within the WISD. So resources in regards to that, I think would be helpful.
One of the things I would like the legislature to take another look at is that 6 or 7 years ago, there seemed to be real bipartisan support to making the NWA the Michigan assessment. And the legislators seem to understand the logic of having an assessment that gave the data to the teachers, to the staff in real time so that they could adapt and drive their instruction. The legislatures also at that time, there seemed to be bipartisan support to the logic of reducing the amount of time lost on assessments. And since many of the districts in Michigan already use NWA, it seemed like they were headed in a direction of making that our state assessment. And then somebody yelled squirrel, and everybody got distracted, and they've allowed themselves to stay distracted, and nothing has happened with that. So I would really like them to get back and do work that actually impacts students.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Jan, because, I mean, we're getting M-STEP data so far behind. And the fact, I mean, just this data that Ryan shared with us, you know, we were able to see fall, winter, and spring. We're able to give that information to teachers right away and that they can make decisions on for their students. So I would strongly advocate for that as well.
And this was something that when you would hit the offices in Lansing and you'd talk to legislatures across all the aisles, they were all supporting this. And again, they let themselves get distracted by a squirrel, and all of a sudden we're not even thinking about it.
Well, and at the very least, I mean, if for whatever reason they want to continue with the M-STEP, that we have to get that data sooner. I mean, I'm going to exaggerate, I know, but we get that data so late that it really doesn't mean anything to us anymore. The kids are well into the next year before we even get that data, and then by the time you break it down, they're almost done with the next year. And so it's just, to me, is not helpful at all.
So a lot of people took the words right out of my mouth for several things, but one of the other items that, especially after we had the presentation from the consortium, I really feel like a strong continued support or additional money into preparing our kids who are going into skilled trades and whatnot to just be prepared immediately when they leave high school to either go into a paid apprenticeship or directly into the workforce. But I mean, we knew a lot about the consortium before, but I don't know if anybody else felt the same way. After I saw so much information, I thought that presentation was great. It really just kind of heightened my awareness of the whole thing. And I just think that's so important for our kids who are not college bound or military bound, but to have that training, you know, before graduation, which is awesome, but then segue right into a strong career job for them when they leave. So I would be in support of that.
And I think it was interesting too to see that the programs that were full and there were waiting lists, and those are skills that we see, at least in the media and anecdotally, those are the skills that the state needs, right? We're talking about the skilled trades, the mechanics, the carpenters. That's what we're looking for, and those, we don't have enough spots for all the kids that are interested in those things. So if we could expand those, that would be very helpful all around.
Well, I know Mrs. Version and I always haunted those workshops at our conferences. And the Governor's Summit and all of those over the years. And one of the things that most of the counties that were presenting had in common was they had a special millage just for those programs.
One last thing for me would be if there's any other unintended consequences of the new retirement. Obviously, that affected us here with Mr. Porter, but I don't know if other districts are experiencing that. I know there were some issues with the bus drivers, but that was quickly resolved. But if there's other unintended consequences of some of the legislation like that, that may not allow us to have people continue in positions that they would show value to the district.
Or even volunteer. That's how strict it is. Right. It's ridiculous. And I feel bad because our hands are literally tied. Like there's nothing we can do about it, but hopefully that's going to change soon.
Excellent. Well, I think, and Naomi kind of, she's the superintendent at the ISD, kind of hinted towards this, and I'm sure this doesn't shock Brian, that a lot of the superintendents are thinking about these same issues. And so the hope is to work with superintendents and our districts and, again, kind of form an alliance to say this is what is incredibly important. Several of these have come up. So in just the talks of our exec board, where I said, like, we had Lincoln, so, Selena's there as well, Yipsy, myself, and Ann Arbor, and several of these have already come up. So I think there's going to be some very valued resource in this and being able to combine ourselves. And we do have a very powerful voice and some powerful legislators. So the hope is that we can move forward and actually make some change or at least make some waves. So again, not to put you on the spot tonight, but something pop in your mind, by all means, email me, shoot me a text. We're in the process of kind of firming up the calendar, but I do believe we have a tentative meeting as far as the exec board goes in December, so I could maybe have some updates on that. But as far as moving forward goes, I will be able to tell you the next legislative breakfast date after that meeting as well. So I thank you all for your suggestions, and again, something else happens to pop up, by all means, let me know. The hope is, again, to kind of be more of a force moving forward and making more of a wave, hopes of change, versus just sitting back and being washed over. So we're going to at least try, right?
Excellent. Thank you for your service on that committee. We appreciate it. We appreciate you taking our feedback back for consideration. All right, so at the last meeting, we did receive the formal report from the Communications Committee, and I did talk about that at this meeting that we would talk about the goals that were presented in that document. So at your desk before the meeting, I just submitted a simple spreadsheet that kind of lists off the four main areas, which were Big Red Board chats, the website improvements, web-based and publication and social media, and then Communications Committee. And then you'll see some major areas underneath each of those, and then the specific recommendation underneath that. And so I thought, as part of our discussion, we would kind of look at each of these areas, and then is this something that we want to implement as soon as we can or when it's feasible? Is it something that we want to send back to committee for clarification? Do we have some questions? Do we want to refer it to the district communication committee that we talked about forming out of this that Mr. Gearbaugh will lead, or is this something that we don't even want to have under consideration at this time? So I'm not looking for any votes on this. I'm pretty much treating this as a consensus document, like we can live with this as we move forward. So no specific action, but at least we can talk through these, so that we can give some feedback to the committee. We can understand where we're at on some of these items that they brought up in regards to recommendations and move forward. So any other feedback from Ms. Frade or Ms. Rosenleacher in regards to this?
No, I think this is a great starting point for us to go through and think about what is manageable.
So the first goal area was the Big Red Board chats, and the recommendation from the committee was that we at least hold those quarterly. So does anybody have any concerns, questions in regards to that?
My only thought on that is where it says quarterly and it has each school, I don't know what fifths is, but if we had quarterly and we had one at each school, but then we had one that was necessarily more just like the board, like if we have the schools, I think the intent was to maybe have the schools kind of participate too, a little bit?
That was the setting. The setting is
The
it.
setting,
The
okay,
setting.
okay.
So,
Just
like,
making sure.
Yeah. So
Okay.
again, more around the board participation in it. Yep. So we would have a big red board chat at each of the schools. So.
Okay. I think we agreed or thought maybe moving forward it'd be good to have them all in the cafeteria so everybody knew ahead of time where they were. So it's kind of an easy go-to place,
Yep.
which works out. Just so everyone, throw it out there as an idea.
So is everybody okay with basically, we're going to implement a quarterly schedule for those? I think we're pretty much in agreement with that.
Mr. Sislo?
Sure.
I would love to see if when we get this rolling quarterly, that it's consistent year to year. That we're not changing the month. We try and pick a time and stick with that, so people know to expect that.
Excellent point. And I think we did talk about that somewhat as far as like the beginning of school, after break, before spring break, and then at the end of the year. That's kind of the cadence. And then we would go into the setting, which is where we said if we had it quarterly, we'd have one at each school. Like Ms. Freight said, that it would be at the cafeteria. Does anybody have any concerns regarding that recommendation? So we can implement that one ASAP or when feasible. The next one was there was a proposal to rename it from Big Red Board Chat to Big Red Chat, and then sponsored by whoever's holding that chat. So the idea here would be it's a Big Red Chat hosted by the Board of Education. Those would be the quarterly ones that we would have. And then if there was a school or Mr. Gearbaugh or another organization that wanted to have a Big Red Chat, it would be the Big Red Chat hosted by this organization. So that was the thinking behind that. So that it was kind of this is the standard naming and communication regarding that.
Yep. Again, for transparency and consistency, so that everybody knows what to expect when a Big Red Chat comes out.
So any concerns with that recommendation? So we'll move forward with that one.
Well, wait.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just trying to think through
Sure,
this.
yeah.
Because I think we continue to struggle with what is the communication that can and should come from the board versus communications that can and should come from the superintendent and administration and then from, individual schools, teachers, things like that. And so my concern is that if we have just a Big Red Board Chat, but then we change who it's hosted by, personally, I think that causes confusion about who's, that these are the Board of Communications, or the Board of Education's communications versus the district communications. And maybe I am drawing too stark of a line, but I feel like we've worked really hard over the last year or so to kind of maintain those swim lanes so that everyone is clear on what we can do and what we can't do, and what we should do, and where those lines kind of, even though they are, a little fluid, the lines are there. And so I'm concerned that if we have the Big Red Board Chat hosted by the Board of Education, and then you have a Big Red Board Chat the next month hosted by the superintendent, then those lines start to blur again as to who's communicating what and for what reason.
Yeah, but that's why it wouldn't be called, it's going to be a Big Red Chat.
I'm sorry, I keep saying board.
Okay,
but
so it'd be a Big
Red
Red,
Chat, yeah.
it could be presented by the board. I understand what you're saying. I just wanted to say, yeah, it would go from a Big Red Board Chat to a Big Red Chat presented by the Board of Education, or Big Red Chat presented by Mr. DeSarbo for Paddock School, but that was the thought behind it.
I think the thought was also to have some consistency in the type of meeting, and so that it is an open forum, you can come and chat, and not the formality of what we have here as the board. There's more question, answer, so where it's clearly stated who it's presented, so we would only have the 3 board members so as to not devoid the Open Meetings Act. If it's presented by Mr. Gearbaugh, the information is from Mr. Gearbaugh. They're not necessarily our board members there because it's his meeting. If it's presented by Mr. DeSarbo, your information is coming, correctly or directly from Mr. DeSarbo concerning Paddock. and his information to be presented out there, just to be very consistent in the kind of meeting and the way the communication is being relayed to everyone.
So are we setting expectation now that individual principals are going to be having big red chats?
So-
I left the board out.
Right, so that would be, so our communication would come through the Big Red Chat presented or hosted by the board on a quarterly basis. The other Big Red Chats would be, that would be determined by the district committee, communications committee.
Okay.
So that
Okay.
was,
Can I ask
We
a-
want to make sure we're not delving into the weeds here. That-
sure, absolutely. I mean, it's a valid point.
To me, let me ask a clarifying question. This is more about the naming mechanism, so that they're always the same name and people become
Used to
comfortable
the
with that
idea,
name.
Yes.
To me, I might flip it and just say it's Board Big Red Chat, Superintendent Big Red Chat, Paddock Big Red Chat. Like, put the organization first, and then it's always called a Big Red Chat. And that way, people start to learn what that means. Example, we have some principals that have done coffee with the principal. Instead of calling it coffee with the principal, we call it the high school Big Red Chat. That way, there's this consistent naming, and they kind of know what's going to happen there. But if you put that name first, then I think, Mrs. Heike, that clarifies kind of who's running that and
Perhaps.
keeps those separate a little bit. I don't know. That's just a thought.
I mean, we can take
I'm
that.
I'm comfortable with it. I just think
Wanna-
it's something we need to be
understood.
aware of as it moves forward, is that, you know, we've tried to establish these norms, and I don't want them to
Sure.
get lost because of a naming convention.
Well, we can definitely take it back to the committee. I mean, I think, I guess I'm hearing that, I mean, there's thought that it does need to be named so that it's identified, so just how it's fleshed, like we don't need to get into the weeds and how it's named here, but, all right. So we'll go ahead and we'll just seek clarification on that one.
Perfect.
Advertising, so basically these were the methods that were recommended for advertising Big Red Board Chats. So the school messenger, which is the email, robocall ways, the website, the school calendars and the district calendar, and Facebook and Twitter. We've
And
done-
all of these exist, so
Yep.
we're not recreating anything. It's just to try to get out there. I believe at the last meeting that, or the big chat that Betty and Andrew and I were all at, it was apparent that all of these had brought in at least one or two people.
Yep.
So it was a great way of making sure we're actually getting people out there, and that it wasn't just one of these that worked significantly more than another. We kind of needed all of them to get the audience that we got, and all of them actually did hit an audience to get participation. So there was value in having something consistently said on all of these avenues to make sure that we're reaching our community.
So I'm going to agreement that we have implement these as soon as possible when feasible. All right. Then we talked about, there was a recommendation regarding the topics. So the recommendation that was, there was a high interest topic to be part of the meeting, but also allow for an open time for any questions or concerns at the meeting. That was the recommendation of the committee in regards to the topics for the Big Red Chat.
So kind of come in with an idea of what we're talking about, and then obviously talk about that, but then not limit anyone to having questions or answers, or, you know, here we are, once we're done talking about that topic, we don't just kill the meeting. We are open to anything that our community wants to discuss with us.
Any concerns with that one? All right. The next one was that it would be community hosted. So this was primarily that it would be supported by members of the committee, potentially, you know, handing out, if we had handouts, like at the last meeting we had handouts, if there's members of the committee that would help hand those handouts out, you know, make sure that we're directing people in the right location, things such as that. So people helping out the logistics of the at the event.
Right.
Any concerns with that?
I think it's wonderful to have members of the committee there to assist with some of that, but I think we need to also make it very clear, because one of the my understanding, one of the reasons we have the communications committee is to make sure that the Board of Education is communicating more in a two-way fashion. And so it really is about the 3 members of the board that are attending that,
I
to
think
be
that's
leading
fair.
that conversation.
I think that's fair.
And then the last one was held consistently, which kind of speaks to what Ms. Rosenleacher said as far as a cadence of the meetings, at least for the board meetings, as far as, you know, this is when the board ones are, as far as beginning of the year, after break, before spring break, and then at the end of the school year. It's kind of that cadence that they be held consistently. So, any concerns with that? All right. The next main area of focus was the website improvements. So one of the things was to fix bugs. One of the things that is an issue is the search bar. It's also an issue with any of the districts that use, I forgot what the... Blackboard. If you look at any district that uses Blackboard, for some reason there's an issue with the search bar. I don't know if you want to speak any more to it, Mr. Gearbaugh.
The only thing that I will say is if you go to a lot of websites, the search bar is not real effective. What we need to do is investigate with some help from Blackboard and find out, is there something that we haven't done in the design of our website properly so that that search bar works? And so that's something that we would look into. So I think the when feasible might come into play a little bit there as to, you know, our tech director can get on it and get working with them, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be resolved. If it's, oh, we need to go into every single page and add some piece of information to every single page so that it then hits the search, it's going to take some time to get there. We can begin investigating it and find out what might help, but the actual fix might not happen right away.
And we can also, I mean, we can use 2 of these check marks as we look. I mean, it can be implement when feasible, but maybe we want to keep this on the radar of the district committee as well. So, timely updates, and for these were just some examples that were listed as part of the meeting, was staff information at the beginning of the year and some lunch account information. Really, those are district communication issues, not necessarily from the board. So I mean, those are things that would be referred to the district committee in my mind.
I do want to clarify too, the lunch accounts, that was just an incident this year because of a switch in the software that we use to accept credit card payments. And so it was kind of a conflict between 2 pieces of software, and every district that implemented those 2 pieces of software had that problem. We pretty quickly got a fix out that gave parents another route to deposit money. We are now back to both mechanisms working.
Okay.
So that's already been addressed.
Perfect.
So I'm good with saying ASAP.
Okay.
So I agree with you, Andrew, that these probably need to be referred to the district communications committee. But then I wonder too, if this is a good time to ask, at our last meeting, we talked about potentially needing like a communications director to help with some of this. And I think I asked Brian if he could investigate any surrounding districts that had such a position and what that may cost.
So I did. I have about 5 or 6 responses. Some of them include job descriptions. Some of them are similar to what we're looking for. Some of them are a little bit less than what we're looking for. Some of them might be more. Some of them came with what their salary is. Some of them I'm going to have to nudge the superintendent again to get the salary. But I did start doing that research so that when we get to the point where we're speaking about that, I can kind of talk about some of those specifics. I have not had time to consolidate all of that information, but I have probably 6 response emails. Like I said, some of them with attached job descriptions and different things. So I have started doing some of that research.
And I guess then that can be a recommendation that comes from your district communications committee.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The next recommendation was the school board menu, and to have that be moved to the main banner instead of underneath the district information. And actually, that's already been accomplished. So Mr. Gearbaugh went ahead and asked for that to be done, and that has been done. So we can say that that's been implemented ASAP when feasible. It's been done. This next idea was a navigation hub, where there is an organizational chart that exists. Potentially, if you look at the specific recommendation, as far as maybe contact information within that organizational chart instead of a separate page. Also, the chain of command, if there's concerns or issues in the district as far as where, if I have a concern, who do I start with in regards to that? It's something that Jan has brought up many times, and she's had learnings on it that she's gone to, which would be valuable. And then if there are frequently asked questions that come to the board in emails or such, that we would implement maybe some type of FAQ section in regards to that. So I kind of lumped those all together. But again, this would be more of the board communication as far as where to start within the district instead of coming to the school board first. If you have a concern, here's some resources that if you have an issue, you can start with these areas. That's kind of the thoughts behind this navigation hub.
I think that's a good idea, and we can put under the implement as soon as possible when feasible.
Okay. Any other, so we say implement as soon as possible when feasible?
I guess I say that, but then who would be in charge of doing that? I'm comfortable implementing it, I just don't know who would be responsible for that. Because I think I said at the last meeting, I don't have any web skills that I could go do that.
I already have the org chart, and I can put together something that kind of references chain of command. A lot of the direction's going to be start at the lowest source you can. Okay. Example, if you have a concern with a classroom, talk to the teacher. If you don't get resolution with the teacher, talk to the principal. If you don't get resolution with the principal. So we could kind of build that for different types of issues. Mr. Sissel and I talked about this a little bit. So, if you have a classroom issue, here's kind of where you start and go. If you have an athletic issue, here's where you start and here's where you go. If you have a building issue, here's where you start. And so I think it wouldn't take myself and the administrative team too long to put together a 1 or 2 page document. And I already have a document created that I share with internally with all of the directors and principals and athletic directors and all of their email addresses and phone numbers. So I don't think it would take too long.
Okay.
We can work with kind of where does that go on the website. And then the board frequently asked questions. I have trained a certain board president to be able to edit some of the website. So I don't want him to have to take on too much, but he's the one that's going to see the frequently asked questions coming to the board from the community. Right. And so I can help him create maybe a sub-page on the board's section of the website that is FAQs, and I can help him figure out how he could quickly, throw out a new question and answer onto that. So okay. I think within a month or two, we could get all of those accomplished.
Okay.
And I think we can also refer to these to the district communications team as well. So,
yep.
Yeah. And then the last recommendation was just to improve the general ease and use, which I think I would refer that to the district communications committee. I mean, as this evolves, you're going to have those conversations. Are you guys comfortable with that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I would also. On that one, I think we had talked about the fact that I understand that our website sometimes struggles on cell phones. Part of that is when we purchased Blackboard, cell phones weren't as prolific as the way that people looked at websites. And so we need to look at, does Blackboard have a better solution to that, or does this mean a change in software, which means a fairly large expense and a redesign of the entire page? I think one of the things we talked about was seeking from the committee. It sounded like they had found some pages they liked better than ours. Okay. And so there might be a little seek clarification from the committee on that one.
Great idea.
To find out, like, hey, we really love this district's, or we really love the city of blank, or we give us and not a general website, but an organization's website. Give us some examples of good ones and what they like, and then that might help us figure out a little bit of how we could redesign ours. So I would ask that we maybe go back for some clarification on that one.
Sure, we can do that. The other thing is the suggestion that Ms. Saunders had at our last meeting in regards to an app. I don't know, maybe we should put that under, we can go back to the committee in regards, and maybe put this underneath website improvements. If that's something that we can ask and see if that's something that I think it's a great idea.
Agreed.
But we can at least bring that back to the committee for discussion at our next meeting to see if that is something that we want to move forward. All right, so if we flip the page over, the next general area was the web-based publication and social media. This was the group that Ms. Rosenleacher was a part of. This, I mean, when I look at this section, a lot of this is more focused on what's going to come from district communications. Obviously, the board is going to have pieces of these. Do you have some thoughts on that, Ms. Rosenleacher?
That's really where we ended up kind of landing as well, is there are some things with the board that we could communicate through some of these tools, but it really is about district communications. And so referral to a district committee is where this really should lie.
Other thoughts on that? I mean, so they had 4 focus areas, like, events coming up, did you know, profiles of teachers, of coaches, even board members, administrators, just profiles of people that work in the district, this day in history. And then obviously the platforms, those would be the platforms that would be used. I think these are good ideas. I think it's just a matter of who implements them. And that brings us somewhat back to the resources question that Ms. Heike brought up and that Ms. Kier brought up at the last meeting, as far as, what resources are needed in order to accomplish what's being asked from these recommendations. So a lot of this, we're going to continue to seek clarification, there's like seek more information. I think we understand what people want, but we need more information on how this, if we do need if we need to hire a resource to help with this, are there internal resources that we can use? What are the concerns if we do go that way? So my thoughts are basically the first two, the focus area and the platforms, would be referred to district committee. The thoughts on the resources would also come from that committee, I think, in consultation with Mr. Gearbaugh as that's moved forward. Do other people have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think one of the concerns that came up when we were going over the recommendations at the last meeting was to use students and/or volunteers, there needs to be, especially if it's students, some level of supervision. And so that's where that new communications person could come into play, where we could utilize our students to assist with some of this. But there's a dedicated person that is in charge of that group of students.
So there's going to be some type of monetary resource that's needed in order to accomplish these things.
I think so.
All right, and then the last recommendation was in regards to the communications committee in general. So there was a recommendation that the communications committee become a regular board committee. Currently, it is an ad hoc committee. So I know we've had some discussion on that. There's some discussion on it at the last meeting. What are people's thoughts on it becoming a regular board committee?
I think we should do it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
As do I. I think it follows very well with our strategic plan and what our community has been asking of us.
And I'll be the dissent there in saying, I think anytime a committee meets, they should have a specific goal that they're trying to achieve.
That's a fair point. I mean, I think we definitely had an agenda at our meetings that we talked about, and obviously if there was a meeting, I think it would be a reasonable ask that there's an agenda for the meeting that what we're trying to accomplish at the meeting. The next recommendation is the makeup of the committee, that it includes 3 board members like like our other committees at this time, and then representatives from all the schools. So when we first formed the committee, we cast a wide net and asked, and we evaluated those applications were reviewed and chosen. It was great because we got a lot of people that were interested. We got a lot of feedback which led to these recommendations. And personally, where we're at with this is we're in this transition period where that committee provided us these recommendations. And like we've talked about before, Mr. Gearbaugh is interested as part of the district communication plan and seeing who's interested in continuing to serve on the district committee. And then really just trying to figure out how best these are formed. And I'm not sure. That's where have a good discussion around that going forward, because we'll definitely be talking about that at our next meeting, at our next communications meeting, how that's going to look moving forward. I have some thoughts. I don't know if others have thoughts on that as well.
I think we're currently aware, just so the rest of the board is aware, that there are some members that are on that committee right now that have said, it's been real, thank you, they're good, and they've put in their time, and they're good. There's also been an ask of those committee members if they would like to move on, if they have an interest in the district committee or communications committee that Mr. Gearbaugh wants to put together. So as Andrew said, we'll be discussing and being able to see what the number of people and the participation is going to be after our next meeting. But it's been really nice to have that diversity and that input from all the parents from all the different schools, so that you have a perspective of each school represented.
And I think, too, that helps give you some, just so we're clear, when we say a representative from every school, I assume we're not necessarily talking about staff, but we're talking about a community member representing each school, because I think that the beauty of this communications committee, as opposed to some of our other committees, is that this is definitely one that needs community input. And so I just so we're clear, but I do support that we handle it that way, to have community members on the committee itself.
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah, Mr. Farrell.
So on the 3 board members, if we move forward with it being a regular committee, would the board members be appointed to those committees in January like all the other committees?
Yeah, that would be, yes, that would be yep.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's been some conversation about revamping the existing committees, and as we do that, does this become one of the standing committees? And so it might not be we have all of them that we have and this, it might be that they kind of get revamped and responsibilities get moved, but that this would be
To tie into the strategic plan?
right.
Okay.
Yeah, what we had talked about was possibly having the board committees tied to the different goals of the strategic plan, and then kind of figure out the responsibilities that we have right now for those committees, which one of those 4 do they fit under, or do they fit under, and can we do that revamp? The goal would be to do that prior to January, when board seats are filled, and then we appoint people to the different committees. So I think that could happen, if that's something the board's interested in, is making that a committee. I think that could happen as the board looks at revamping the whole committee structure.
Yeah, I support it being a regular board committee. I didn't mention that earlier, but I think that's a good idea.
So maybe on this one with the 3 board members, we seek some clarification and refer to the district committee. We'll obviously have conversation around this at our next communications meeting. So, and then the last 2 were basically, to review progress against these recommendations, and then to communicate that progress which I would, that seems, that needs to happen. I mean, that's pretty,
It seems that the best way to do that is that when we do our goal setting again in January or February, that we would just include these action items as part of our board goals for the next round.
so I'd say we'd implement these ASAP when feasible.
I also think those give, if it becomes a standing committee, that's at least one responsibility that that standing committee has, is to continue to review. And then if another concern comes up, then they kind of have now a targeted agenda for a while, but they're always kind of there to review that. That at least gives them one thing to review and come back and report at board meetings what's going on.
All right, so I will, we'll fill this out, and then, like I said, we'll be talking about this at our next communications committee meeting with those who are in attendance. Mr. Gearbaugh will be at that meeting because that was also kind of the kickoff of the district committee as far as those who wanted to stay on. So we will definitely be speaking about this and then moving forward. So I appreciate the feedback. All right, next up is public comment. Just a reminder that this meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business. It is not to be considered a public meeting. There are 2 times for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. When addressing the board, you will be asked to state your name. The board determines the amount of time granted to individuals or groups to speak. Each person shall be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. I'll give you a 30-second warning, and I'll ask you to finish your thought when the timer goes off. Board members may question speakers but are not obligated to answer questions or make statements or commitments in response to issues raised by the public. In general, such items will be referred to the superintendent for advisement, investigation, study, and/or recommendation, or designated as future agenda items for board consideration. Are there any students who would like to address the board?
Hi, I'm Jules Meads. I feel as a senior, and having spent the past 4 years at Milan High School, there are a few things that would benefit the future students here. Number one, I feel that 25 and 30 minutes that we have for lunch is not enough time. Half of the time spent is in line, and the other half is being used to eat your food. So I feel we should have a 6-hour class day and an hour for lunch. This gives students enough time to eat their food, or get their food and eat it, and have enough time for like a mental break. I also feel that lunch should be an open campus for at least seniors and be able to buy the food that we actually want to eat instead of the cafeteria food. The second topic is I feel that the tennis teams have been growing bigger and bigger each year. The boys team last year was about 15 or more, and this year it was about 20 or more. And the girls team last year was 20, and this upcoming year I have heard that a lot of people are going to join the team, so it's going to be even bigger. With this, we are running out of space on the courts. The whole boys team this year was complaining of not having enough space. For half the practice, we do drills and we have to wait in lines because there isn't enough space on the courts. So we barely get in enough practice that we need to be good and efficient team. We have plenty of space on each side of the courts to add more. I'm sure we could fit 10 courts even on, like, around the courts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Meads. Jules Meads. Thank you. Are there any other students who'd like to address the board? Any public that would like to address the board?
Andrea Benning. I just had a couple of questions listening to the presentations tonight and hearing the conversations about the recommendations from the Communications Committee. My first question is for Mr. McMahon. It's really exciting to hear that there's morning math support at Simons. I have a student who attends Simons, and I was not aware that that was something that was available there. And so I'm just wondering, How it's determined who receives morning math support, and I'm wondering if that's available to special education students or if that is strictly for the general education population. You don't have to answer me tonight, but if you wanted to email me that would be great. In regards to the Communications Committee recommendations, I'm just wondering if any of the consensus discussion items tonight will be eventually going to the board for a vote. It seems like there's some things there that maybe might need to be some action items, specifically the concept of having big red chats and having them be quarterly meetings for the board. It would be lovely if that was documented so that that stays a consistent item, especially if you're considering opening up big red chats to be sponsored by other community members, such as principals or different committees or community gatherings, things like that. So if it was noted that strictly quarterly board chats need to be hosted by the board, I think that that would be a good way to make sure that that stays continuous and it doesn't eventually fizzle out as board members roll over and you get different committee members. I'm also wondering that if you're talking about this navigation hub or and frequently asked questions, those two things would be new to the community, so I'm wondering how you're going to communicate those items to the community so that they have a specific way of knowing, oh, there is a new thing here that I can look at so I don't have to ask these questions continuously of the board. I'm wondering specifically about the navigation hub, if that's something that can be made into a physical paper document and passed out at registration. There's whole documents of registration items, building items, all of those things. It seems like it would be a natural fit to put a navigation hub in that packet as well. I'm wondering about if you're making the Communications Committee a regular board committee, how you're going to gather community members, how you're going to put that information out there. As it becomes a recent beginning startup again, will you draw on previous interests? You guys sent out a questionnaire, I think. If you'll look at people who were previously interested but perhaps not selected for this particular committee, would it be a natural fit to ask them if they would be interested in the upcoming committee if you make that regular? And then I'm just wondering again how you'll communicate all of these things to the community at large. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ms. Bennick. Are there others?
Holly Blade. I actually wasn't sure I was going to make it here tonight, but then I received an email this afternoon from someone, and I realized it was important that I be here to read it for them. To the Milan Board of Education and all the Milan allies, I'm a longtime resident of Milan. I am also a member of the LGBT community. I am not proud to write this letter. I wish I felt more comfortable and confident enough to come to the board meeting and speak my truth to everyone myself. However, the reality is I am not. I admit we as a community, the community that I care to belong to, do not attend school board meetings and we do not stay informed regarding a lot of local politics. However, a neighbor of mine recently mentioned something about the parents at the meetings wanting to ban LGBT-friendly books and the candidates for school board being homophobic. This was startling to me. I grew up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I came out as gay in the early 2000s. I even served my country. But I've also felt the heartbreak and devastation from being rejected by family and have been witness to rampant discrimination of gay and lesbians in the communities that I have been a part of in the past. So to hear this was troubling to me in so many ways. Because of that experience, I decided to spend some time watching board meetings, and I was shocked at what I heard. These parents were not homophobic or scared of gays or lesbians in this town. They weren't demanding the exclusion of LGBT kids or expressing hatred towards me or people like me. They were expressing concern for books that had graphic sexual content in them. How dare you sit there and say that my community insists on that content being available to children? I'm a victim of sexual assault as a child. I cannot express enough how traumatic it would be for me to be exposed to books like that at an early age. I do believe there is value in having books with positive gay characters included. However, they don't have to include explicit sexual details for it to be inclusive. There are so many of us who have fought for our right to live our lives and love whomever we choose in peace. I am furious at the ignorance and selfishness of those in our community who claim to be my ally and yet gaslight my own personal trauma with homophobia, which is a vulgar term to me, to advance their own personal political ideals. Stop using me and those in my community to demean those you disagree with. Our real-life trauma and struggles are not yours to use to your political advantage. This person has also told me that they would dedicate their own time to helping us come up with a list of books that would include positive images of LGBT characters, but not have graphic sexual content or violent sexual assault content in them, like some of the other books that have been asked to be removed from the library. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blade. Are there others?
Kirk DeMars, I almost didn't get up and speak this time with something I planned to talk about, but it's with what Holly just said, but it's relative. In my first public comment, I spoke on some kind of general statements, nothing in like exact detail, but I was also alarmed because, you know, even though I wasn't able to be here for like the last 3 or 4 meetings, I did watch them, and the direct responses from some board members, comments that were made, you know, during, you know, the heat of the back and forth on both sides of an issue with, you know, the sexual content in books. You know, I guess I want to emphasize with my comments that it's important that both sides, you know, we're passionate about what we believe, but we have to be able to come to the table and have conversations with each other and not make things personal with each other. You know, you can attack the issues, you know, things people say, but when you attack individuals or their organizations, especially with studied, prepared statements, that's alarming. That's not becoming of a board member. And I'll just not beat around the bush. We know I'm talking about the let them play, let them pray comments that were made, or comment that was made. That was inappropriate to attack that person's organization. I don't know what their online content is. I don't follow it regularly. If there's things they say, that may be true. But that line of talking was clearly an attack on that person and their organization, not the comments they made here in the board meetings and what they were trying to address in the board meetings. You know, comments like students are given a choice what they read and the tone that it was said in, that wasn't helpful either. I mean, yes, students are given a choice, but parents should also be aware of what their kids have access to in the building. You know, just because they can access pornography on their phones, that's not a newsflash to any of us here, does not mean that just because they can access, you know, marijuana out in the community, doesn't mean we should set up a table in the cafeteria and say, if you want it, take some. You know, the comment, then choose as a parent not to have your child check that book out. Again, not helpful. And I alluded earlier to the fact that my child could see this content not being the one that checked it out. And me never being made aware that they saw it or that they accessed it. because that form doesn't help me. You know, these books have been in our library since 2017, 2019. That may be the case, but I'll use a reference that us Michiganders are very aware of, right? Pre the aluminum body vehicles in Michigan, our cars get eaten up by the salt and everything here in Michigan, right? You don't always see the rust on the exterior of your paint on your vehicle. It's being eaten at from the inside out usually. And then the paint chips away and then you see what? The rust. So that kind of comment, just because no one has said anything, it's because they were unaware. I was unaware of a lot of things going on in our district until I got involved in the board meetings. So to use that kind of blanket statement that something doesn't have validity just because someone hasn't addressed it in 4 or 5 years, they're just now becoming aware of it. So now they're doing something about it. And to date, not one request to remove these books has been made. Well, I think now that's starting to happen because parents are aware. So take those things into account. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Mars. Are there other comments? All right, thank you for those comments this evening. Next up on the agenda is student board representative comments. Ms. Molina is unable to attend this evening, so I am going to be reaching out to the others that have applied for that position as we move forward. So,
Mr. Sisler?
Yes.
Do we have an idea of a deadline that when we'll start having them come in? Or
I do not.
Okay.
As soon as possible.
Okay. Do we know, do we have multiple applicants?
We have applicants.
Okay.
Yep. Next up is superintendent comments.
Thank you. First, I want to start off, homecoming week was a huge success. We want to thank our staff, parents, students, and other volunteers who made the week special for our students. The Spirit Days, food trucks, parade, football game, and halftime celebration of the King and Queen were all enjoyed by many. And again, thank you to everyone who participated and helped coordinate all of those events. Also, the dance was a huge success. For some of you, you may know I live about a half a mile away, and I could hear the students enjoying the dance throughout the evening, so it was really nice. I think we had a DJ that really got the kids involved, and we will definitely make sure that we keep using that same person. I think he made the event a success. The calendar for the remainder of the 2022 year is filling up fast. Everyone is encouraged to visit the district's calendar to locate the dates and times of the high school play, PUFs, the elementary music concerts, the middle school and high school band and choir concerts, and many other important events that are going to occur between now and December 31st. So please make sure you get out and look at those calendars and look at all of the other communications. A lot of very student-driven and student-involved events coming up here in the district. October is National Bully Prevention Month. All 4 buildings have placed additional emphasis on their bullying prevention work throughout the month. I was able to attend some of those special events, and I truly appreciate the work that our buildings are doing to continue to do to support bullying prevention programs and initiatives. I want to congratulate all of our fall season athletes. Some of them are done and some of them are not done, but it's just been amazing to see the numerous teams and individual athletes who have performed well and earned honors for their accomplishments. We thank all of our athletes for their sportsmanship, their dedication to their team, and their positive representation of Milan area schools throughout the county, the region, and the state of Michigan. Parent-teacher conferences were a huge success last week. As you know, this is a very long week for teachers, administrators, administrative assistants, and parents. I truly appreciate everyone's dedication to the relationships that this method of two-way communication creates. I want to thank the parents who attended and all of the staff who were involved. I also want to thank our PTOs and other parent organizations that help provide food and different comfort items to our staff during a week that can be very long yet very valuable. In a partnership with EMU and the WISD, Districts in Washtenaw County will be utilizing juniors and seniors in the education program at EMU as daily substitutes. These students will receive great experience in the classroom prior to their student teaching and will receive a stipend that is being coordinated through the WISD. Most of the students are available only 1 or 2 days a week, as they will be substitute teaching on the days that they don't have classes at EMU. Right now, we have 4 students that are interested in doing this in Milan area schools. Mr. McMahon and I participated in a meet and greet with them, and we look forward to getting them on board. I do want everyone to know that they do meet the requirements that are required by the state of Michigan for substitute teachers, so they have to have 60 credit hours of college work completed. So these are folks that are in line with those requirements, but it's a way that we can access some additional substitutes and also get them to see our amazing district and possibly have recruit possibilities for those folks that come out and work for us during this program. Some positive news. Last week, Jake LaCrosse, a Simons teacher, and his wife had a baby boy, Landon Craig LaCrosse. We congratulate the LaCrosse family on their addition. I want to thank those board members who were able to attend the MASB Annual Leadership Conference. I'm sure we'll hear some information about that during board member comments. I know that the knowledge that they gain helps improve our district. And beyond this conference, I'm always impressed with the efforts that our Board of Education members put in gaining knowledge through conferences, CBA classes, and other professional developments that they attend. This is above and beyond what a lot of board members do, and I'm extremely proud of how much time our board members put into gaining additional knowledge on the work that they are charged with here in the district. I want to personally thank the students and families of Milan High School for their dedication to continued school safety during the lockdown at Milan High School on October 17th. I also want to thank the Milan Police Department and the other police agencies that helped assist the district throughout the incident. The district is working diligently with the Milan Police Department to identify the individual or individuals who wrote the message on the bathroom stall wall. It is important for everyone to understand that the district, in addition to taking severe disciplinary action, will press charges against the individual or individuals responsible. The district wants to remind our students and families that October 31st, which is this coming Monday, December 9th, February 3rd, and May 5th have been changed from half-days to non-student days. The calendar change was made to allow for additional professional development for our staff, but again, we want parents to know there is no school this coming Monday, October 31st. The governor recently announced the Michigan Future Educator Fellowship Program that offers aspiring teachers a scholarship to eliminate or lower the cost of tuition while they train to be educators. Awards cover the cost of tuition and fees up to $10,000 a year and are renewable for up to 3 years. Students that receive the award commit to teaching in Michigan classrooms for at least 3 years after graduation, and some of that depends on how many years they accept the grant as to how many years they have to teach in Michigan. If they do not work in Michigan as teachers, then that grant becomes a zero-interest loan. But it is important for our students, and I will be working with Mr. Shin in the high school, that our students who are graduating in the next couple of years understand that if they are interested in education, there is a potential for a $40,000 grant towards paying tuition as they go through that program. And just by working for a few years in Michigan after they graduate, they will never owe that money back. Those that are interested should look at michigan.gov/MI student aid. And last, I want to remind everyone to vote on Tuesday, November 8th. The polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Hopefully everyone is registered to vote and knows where their polling place is. Results can be viewed at washtenaw.org/elections. Please understand that even though a large majority of our votes do take place in Monroe County, all of those get handed over to Washtenaw County, at least for our school board election. So all of the results from Monroe County and Washtenaw County do start to fall into the Washtenaw County elections website. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Mr. McMahon.
Yeah, thank you. I have a few comments. I want to share with the board just an update. We are submitting every fall for the count day. I collect and submit to Kathy Mee our at-risk and free reduced numbers, and she submits them to the state. So that's going to be happening. Well, I submitted them to her today, so next week, prior to the end of the month. Our at-risk numbers currently for the fall, it changes every semester, but currently our 77% of our students are characterized as at-risk. That's based on test scores, attendance, family history. There's a whole number of categories, and free reduced lunch is actually one of those categories, EL, kind of you name it. But that's a significant number. That's actually down 1% from last fall, but last fall was even higher than normal because of the pandemic situation. So 77% is pretty significant. And then our free reduced number is 38% currently, and that's actually up 8% from last fall. But last fall was a little bit lower because the meals were covered, so the applications weren't coming in as we would like them. I actually think that number is a little bit low for our district, but that's what's reported to us. I want to give you some grant updates. The additional instructional time grant, that's section 35A5, which I've talked about in the past. That's been submitted. That was last week. Our request is just under $50,000. Historically, we get funded a little under $30,000 on that, but my request is for $50,000. The robotics grant is due Monday. We'll be submitting that. That includes stipends and an increased amount allocated to each of our teams for supplies, which is terrific. So we'll get that in by Monday. The assessment reimbursement grant, Section 41, and the Section 98C grant that I talked about today, those are all due within the next few weeks. We were notified last Friday that our consolidated application has been approved. That means it's approved now, but we can obligate our funds back to July 1, so we've been spending those funds already, but that just means we're now approved to spend close to $200,000 in the consolidated app that we've already been spending, but it's approved, so that's good. And we're waiting on our Title III application to be approved. That's still out there. And the last thing I want to share is, this is Principal Appreciation Month, so I just want to take a second to acknowledge our program administrators and our building principals and assistant principals. They've been working, what seems like or I should say feels like nonstop since the start of the pandemic and post-pandemic, trying to get our students everything they need and our teachers back up to speed. And they do a lot, and they're tired, and they continue to come to work and give everything they have. And I just want to, say publicly that I really appreciate their work and effort, and we're fortunate to have such great leaders in our district. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMahon. Board member comments.
Shall I?
Sure, Ms. Freight.
Thank you, Mr. Zislo.
Yeah.
First and foremost, it's great to see the students in the audience. Thanks for being here. I don't know if it's Mr. Morlock's extra credit or however it's working. It's really nice to actually see you. And thanks, Jules, for getting up and talking to us. It's not always easy, and it's fun to hear from you. Appreciate that. Mrs. Bennick, thanks for coming up and giving us our details and things. Hopefully we can get you one more person in on that to help you out. Appreciate that. Also very thankful to our staff and community, like Mr. Gearbaugh mentioned, for parent-teacher conferences, for coming out and talking to your teachers and making that connection with your kids, and then for those of you that were able to help out and feed our staff. I know they very much appreciate it, as Mr. Gearbaugh indicated. Those are very late nights, and appreciate that. Just to kind of go off on the two schools, excited for our assignment students and their diligence with their kindness challenge. They've been doing a bunch of things this month for anti-bullying. It's a great way to stress the importance of acceptance, inclusion, and kindness. I'm sure having fun with basketball, Jim Jones was fun too. There's some great pictures on Facebook. MMS, so our middle school kids and our parents, feel free to donate socks. Apparently one lucky 6th grade class will get a sponsored by the student council ice cream party. So tomorrow's the last day to be donating socks. They also have a Halloween costume contest going on, so that should be great, school appropriate, but still quite fun. Tryouts for basketball for 7th and 8th grader also going down tomorrow and next Tuesday, as we do not have school, I believe, on the 31st, so happy Halloween to all of our folks. And downtown trick-or-treating, I believe the board is going to be participating in that, so I hope people come out and enjoy that. I know Mrs. Kiger, thank you very much for making that an added fun and kind of a nice tradition with the board. As Mr. Gearbaugh mentioned, we did indeed go to a conference, or 4 of us did, up to MASB in Traverse City. It was an intense, great Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 days. We were up in Traverse City, which is really nice, but we're generally in conference from 7:30 in the morning till about 9 at night, so didn't really get to enjoy as much of the colors, but it was very valuable. One of the things, Michelle, I was thinking of you, and I think Brian's already aware of this. Apparently, for the first time ever, the state of Michigan has set aside $25 million for different grants. They can meet up to, you probably know about this too, Mr. McMahon, meet up to 50% of this. So you can ask out, reach out. The deadline right now, this is one of the classes I was in, of those 25 million, only 6 million has been asked, or like asked. So they have quite a substantial amount left over. I believe the deadline is November 12th or the 17th, but it would obviously, perhaps we could look into getting different cameras. I know Airport put in new cameras that were really great in all the buildings. They have facial recognition, which is nice for our safety. Or a second resource officer seems to be what the general schools have been asking for of those two top. Something to look into that would be great to have for our school, especially if we can get some grant money in there. They also have an educational background individual now working as the resource officer with the state police. So it's kind of nice to have that benefit of someone with an educational background in there to help assist with the kinds of needs that we need. There are also all kinds of legal updates and suggestions to keep the district on. We'll discuss those. And the speakers, we had 3 different speakers that were tremendous. One that was talked about 7 lenses in which to view things to be more consistent and more transparent and kind of less judgy, if you will, and more of the actual just kind of look at what you're seeing and what lenses you're looking through. I found that incredibly valuable to sit back and think about. There was a gentleman who was incredibly inspiring, Mrs. Rosenleacher is wearing his shirt because I said I would. Came in and basically it's a nonprofit organization focusing on keeping your word and on the impact your word has on others. It's very important to recognize the vastly different needs of others and our way of helping. Our community has a tremendous outreach and we do a great deal to help out our kids, as is the downtown trick-or-treating and all we've done for student-teacher conferences, or student and teacher conferences. So is inspiring to listen to the young man as he spoke to all of us. And our last key speaker spoke about creating a culture of dignity. And as the 4 of us have talked, it was nice to share with the rest of our board. One of the key lessons she had in there was to listen, to validate, not to relate, concentrating on what is being said, not how, or sometimes even who, so that your brain doesn't really disconnect just because you might not like the individual or who is saying it, but what they're actually saying, that every concern does need to be heard, that it's extremely important to be heard, and focusing on listening as an essential skill that I hope to keep in the forethought when I'm listening to our community members and participating in different things. Remembering that we deal with kids is essential. Their brains aren't always developed. Heck, I'll speak for myself, I'm not always the smartest person in the room, so least we forget that we can learn from everyone around us, and it's incredibly important to make sure you take that opportunity when it's presented. So I found the conference incredibly important and valuable, and I do thank the district for affording me that opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Sislo.
Thank you, Ms. Freight. Others?
Mr. Sislo?
Yeah, Mr. Farrow.
A few comments regarding the financial audit. Riemann, the accounting firm, will submit the audit to the Michigan Department of Treasury, and Krista Hendricks will get a copy of it to the WISD. I did not mention that earlier. I also wanted to mention that at some point in the future, we will need to take a look at our assigned fund designations and the amounts. Those should probably be reviewed in the future. These are funds that are assigned but not spent. So currently there's 90,000 in technology, 90,000 in curriculum, excuse me, 75,000 in technology, 90,000 in buses. Pat Ockerly Childhood Center is 268, and $268,925. Athletics is just over $20,000. Buildings and grounds, $75,000. Harness Estate is around $50,000. So again, those are funds that are assigned. We may want to take a look at that in the future. I do want to thank Mr. DeMars for your candor. I do acknowledge that there are topics and discussions that are important to members of our community. So for that reason, I want to make sure that I make myself available to you and others in the community in hopes of better understanding stakeholder concerns. If you're interested, my contact information is posted on the website for any of those that may wish to contact me. Also, at a prior meeting, a community member inquired about our position as it relates to questions on get-to-know-you forms, including the use of pronouns on those types of forms. The community member asked if there is a standard across all buildings. I think this is a very valid question. I will connect with Mr. Gearbaugh on the community member's inquiry. Finally, if you're not aware, Governor Whitmer recently announced the creation of the Michigan Parents Council. Over the last several weeks, the council has been convening roundtables of parents and family members across Michigan to collect parent ideas and feedback to incorporate into next year's state budget recommendations, which is obviously important to public schools. Michigan parents of pre-K through 12th grade students are invited to share feedback through the Michigan Parents Survey. I think you can just Google it or go to the website. The survey takes about 5 minutes to complete. After the roundtables and the survey are complete, the Michigan Parents Council will also plan to host a virtual meeting in early November. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. Others?
Mr. Sislo?
Yes, Ms. Rosenleacher.
First, I just want to remind everyone that Simon's PTO has their spirit wear orders due next Tuesday. It is online only, so go to the Simon's PTO Facebook page and you can learn more there. And then their Dine to Donate is also next Tuesday. It'll be held at the Social House 103 down in Dundee. I want to thank the board members that I was able to attend the MASB conference with. It was very enlightening, my first time attending that conference. I agree with Mrs. Freight. The 3 keynotes were quite remarkable. Linda Fisher-Thornton was the 7 lenses, learning the principles and practices of ethical leadership. And I loved just kind of how she laid out when making decisions and we thinking about the students at the center of our table using those lenses. Alex Sheen was the Because I Said I Would speaker, and he was amazing. There was laughter and tears throughout his time with us. It is a social movement and a nonprofit dedicated to the betterment of humanity through promises made and kept. And that really resonated because it's very easy to make a promise, not so easy sometimes to keep those promises. So I appreciated his message to all of us that day. And then the last speaker was Rosalind Wiseman, who is also the author of Queen Bees and Wannabes. Not to age myself, I said many moons ago, but it was really more like many suns ago, S-U-N-S, that I read that book when my oldest daughter was in middle school. And so her message of creating culture of dignity was quite profound and quite a great reminder for all of us as adults, because sometimes I think our young people get it so much better than we do. And then finally, I was able to attend 4 clinic sessions. One near and dear to my heart was moving from self-care to we care and planning for staff wellness the right way in our schools. And that's such an important part of schools today, given everything our teachers and administrators continue to try to conquer and bring our kids along in a way that they deserve. Maintaining control and civility during chaotic times with Clarkston schools, implementation of a transparent budgetary process with the Board of Education, Superintendent Administration, and school community with Dearborn schools, and academic success from equitable policies from Ferndale schools. And there was so much amazing information for us to continue to learn from and grow from all of those sessions. So thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Rosenleacher.
I'll just segue right from there
Sure,
because
Ms.
I
Murphy.
also attended the conference and wanted to thank Brian and the district for allowing us that opportunity. It's very rare, unless you know somebody who sits on a school board, to be able to connect with people in that way outside of a boardroom or at the board table. So I always come back every conference because I've been going for a long time now, I always come back feeling like, wow, not that we want to over pat ourselves on the back on things, but at the same time, when you talk to some districts and see the mess that they're in and that the progress with getting initiatives accomplished that they do not have, and just the dysfunction on their board in general, it's nice to know that we've tried to stay as focused as we can on our students, no matter what else is going on. So I also attended the 3 keynotes. The 7 lenses of ethical leadership was fantastic. I just think it was a great way for us to step back from some decisions, look at them through those 7 lenses that Ms. Thornton recommended, and look at them kind of from a multidimensional perspective. Sometimes we get focused on one part of a decision, but it's good to step back and think about all the other things that those decisions affect. So I did like that, and that might even be something that we want to look into a little bit with her. She does have a book available. From there, I went to a session called Mental Health Through the Lens of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Social Emotional Learning, which was put on by Brooke Davis. She's a social worker in Kennewa Hills Public Schools, and she was so energetic and phenomenal. She goes out and does professional development at districts because she definitely knows her stuff. But basically, it was a presentation about the importance, this is generalizing it a lot, but focusing on the importance of being a voice for all of our students to ensure that they all feel valued. I also went to a session put on by the Michigan State University Extension. They offer a lot of stuff in our communities that I think people don't know about. So if you ever get the chance to go on there, they offer all kinds of different classes. And it sounds like they're really trying to get communities throughout the entire state to get on board. So if you go onto the Michigan State University Extension website, just Google them. There's all kinds of things to see. Their presentation was communicating through conflict. And it was really about responding rather than reacting to things and taking a pause when a situation is volatile, which I know all of us have been dealing with for a couple of years now, right? In all aspects of our lives. Let's see. Alex Sheen, who did the Because I Said I Would presentation, was one of the best speakers I've ever seen in my entire life. His last name is Sheen. And if you get a chance to Google him or watch one of his TED Talks, he is a phenomenal person. It was a very emotional presentation. I mean, even Mr. Sislo might have shed a tear or two. But you didn't hear that from me.
Did.
But it was very deeply meaningful, and the place that he came from to create this nonprofit, basically in memory of his father, is just tremendous, and the outreach that he has accomplished is just crazy, because it's really just a very simple thing. Like Ms. Leacher said, it's just about keeping promising somebody something and keeping that promise. So the board is probably going to hate me, but they did pass out the little cards, and basically Alex said, this is all you do. It's literally all this card says is down in the corner is because I said I would. And there's nothing else on it. And you write down, like you make a promise to yourself, like something like, I will never text and drive. Or you make a promise to somebody that you care about or you want to connect with. And if you do it with somebody else, you write your promise on the card and you give that person that card. And this is like the cash, basically. So when you fulfill that promise, they give you back your card. And you hold on to that as a reminder of what you did for that person. And it never has to be anything deeply meaningful. It can be something very simplistic. It does not have to cost any money. But I'm going to give everybody at our tables tonight, including Mr. McMahon and Mr. Gerbaugh, a card, because I just thought it was fantastic. And I forgot to wear my shirt, because I did buy a shirt too. But anyway, yeah, Alex Sheen, he was just great. I don't know how anybody wouldn't love listening to him, because he's really coming at it from the right perspective. I also did a class on Crisis Communications 101, which was really interesting because it was put on by a woman who basically, this is her job, is helping organizations like schools or summer camps, organizations that directly deal with kids, communicate in a time of an emergency, like a true emergency. So that was very interesting. Went to the legislative update. Mr. Sislo and I attended the delegate assembly. I also went to a session called When Board Meetings I don't want anybody to laugh. When board meetings are a battlefield, staying student-focused in the midst of chaos. And that was put on by Mount Pleasant Public Schools. And it just talked about staying true to our vision. And Mount Pleasant has really taken the stance that one of the things they really want to do as part of their goals of communication is to share a lot of success stories. And I was glad I went to that presentation because they do have an app for their entire district, kind of what we touched on, yeah. So I'm really hoping that if we go that route, we'll have somebody to talk to. And they're fairly new to the game with that, but it sounds like deep enough into it that they know what they're doing. So yeah, everything basically for their entire district is accessible through this app. And it just sounded amazing. So since that came up recently, I definitely wanted to share that. The Creating Culture Dignity by Rosalind Wiseman was great. I took a couple of CBA classes, and I think that's pretty much it. The other thing I wanted to say is, you know, there's always a lot of districts there that are very large, and they have a person for everything. And I was saying to a couple of the board members, I just feel like it's tremendous. We're small, but and it kind of lends itself to what Mr. McMahon was saying about our administration, that we are small, so our administrative staff especially has to wear a lot of different hats. And when you hear that, you know, big districts have a curriculum director for this and a so-and-so director for this, and, you know, I mean, there's just, you know, a laundry list of people. When I think about the tremendous responsibility and tasks that our people take on, which are really outside of their real job title, it just makes you appreciate that more as a smaller district. So I wanted to give a shout out to our staff who do that every day for our kids. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Macchio. Others?
I'll go next and just go down the line.
Yeah.
First, I want to thank all of our students, our staff, our community members, the Milan Police Department, just everyone for their adherence to the lockdown procedures and the lockdown rules. It's really critical that everyone comply with those rules to keep everyone safe, and everyone did. And I know how hard it was for parents. I had 3 family members in the high school that day, and a niece and well, 5 total. 3 immediate family, a niece and a nephew. I know how difficult it was to sit and wait for the next communication, but thank you everyone that did that. Thank you to the students. I know that could not have been easy. And even having the dogs come in and search you, that's nerve-wracking to have had it happen at an airport. So I can't imagine what it was like for you guys too. So thank you for how well all of you handled it, and kudos to all of you. And thank you to Mr. Gearbaugh. I really felt like, even outside of being a board member, as a parent, I understood what was going on. I understood what my role was. I understood as much as I could what was happening next. And so I think you did a great job of communicating to our community at every step of the way of what was happening and, you know, what they could expect from you. And so thank you to that. Thank you to all the students that are here tonight. It's nice to see you guys out there. Thank you, Jules. Those were great ideas, and I appreciate you sharing them with all of us. I look forward to receiving that list of books with LGBT characters and themes in them. I'd like to take a look at that, just like we took a look at the books list that was provided by Ms. Sanders earlier on dyslexia. Oh, she left. But Ms. Bennick, if you watch the end of this, one way we can document some of these changes, particularly the quarterly big red chats, I left the board part out, is to include it in our board operating procedures, because there is a calendar of events that is included in the board operating procedures, and we can put that in there, and so it will be documented for future board members, and that can continue. So I will work with the policy committee, and that's something we can implement pretty quickly, and see what other of those communication issues we can also incorporate into the board operating procedures to get them documented appropriately for future use. And that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Aika. Mrs. Kiger?
Mr. Gearbaugh, in conjunction with the grant for the educators, I know that we've had members of the MEA express interest that they would be willing to mentor. If we could maybe get that facilitated so that any students that we have moving into that field have someone from their home district to help them. I would appreciate that. And just invite the community to stop at the board table tomorrow night and pick up a novelty at the downtown trick-or-treat.
Awesome. Just a few things from me. The board is in receipt of a FOIA appeal, and we will be considering that appeal at our Wednesday, November 9th meeting, and be taking action on that FOIA appeal. Yes, the conference was outstanding. It was probably one of the better ones that they put on. I was fortunate enough that my boss gave me Thursday and Friday off, gave me vacation time in order to attend the conference on Thursday and Friday. On Thursday, I attended an all-day session with the Michigan Council of School Attorneys, their fall conference, where we discussed LGBTQ plus legal issues. We talked about freedom of speech and First Amendment issues. We talked about the best legal practice for handling stakeholder concerns. We had avoiding the legal pitfalls of staff shortages. We had identifying conflicts of interest on your school board. And then we had a session on school board and politics. All of those sessions followed with Q&As with probably the best school lawyers in Michigan. So that Thursday was a day well spent, and I appreciate being able to attend that conference on Thursday. On Friday, as already been mentioned, the keynote speakers were outstanding. I was able to attend a breakout session on My School Data, which is a very important website, which shows the data for all the schools across Michigan. They go through several updates, and they present updates at this conference to the various stakeholders. So I attended their breakout session. I attended the breakout session for the first keynote address that we've been talking about, the 7 lenses, and actually working through a board issue. So we actually got to use the 7 lenses and work through a real life conflict as part of that breakout session, which was very valuable. The other breakout session I went to was a how-to guide on being a strategic gladiator. That session was very eye-opening. It talked about strategic planning. The presenter, first started off with, how many schools had a strategic plan, and not everyone had their hand raised. I would say there was not quite half, but there was quite a few school districts that didn't have a strategic plan. Then he asked, how many of you regularly look at that strategic plan, and even more hands did not raise. So the fact that we do have a strategic plan and we are looking at it on a regular basis is a kudos to our district, and I appreciate everyone's work in following that strategic plan and working towards the continuous improvement that we want to achieve in regards to that strategic plan. The next session that I attended was governance behaviors that impact student achievement. That was actually put on by the Scott Morrell and another superintendent within Michigan. For those of you, Scott is our MASB rep that does a lot of our education for our board. That was a very valuable session. I will let you know that I did book Scott for our December 21st meeting. So he will be in attendance here for our December 21st meeting for that business that we on that meeting date. Let me see. Oh, as part of they also have exhibitors there. Troon, the law firm that we use, was an exhibitor there. So I did speak to them in regards to updating our policy manual, or changing to a policy manual that they have put together instead of Neola. So that's something that we have talked about as a board goal, and something that we will look into pursuing as well, so that they're more aligned with some of the opinions that we get in regards to legal advice. I also attended a board certification class about board operating procedures, which Mrs. Hiker referred to, and it was also part of one of the breakout sessions that Ms. Rosen-Leacher went to. Was very, again, not a lot of boards have board operating procedures, so we are a fortunate district that has board operating procedures. There are some things that we need to do to update that. they provided some ways to do that through consent and not necessarily through the voting process. Something that we can say, yes, we agreed to that to make some of those changes like we were talking about with the committee structure. Let me see if there's anything else. I think that was it for that session. And then, yeah, I wanted to echo everybody's thanks in regards to the lockdown. I especially want to thank the student that brought it to someone's attention. Without somebody bringing that to our attention, none of that would have happened. So the fact that, and that it was taken seriously and that we were able to hear the response from school administrators and the police is very helpful. And again, yes, to all of our teachers, we appreciate all the extra work that you guys did last week in regards to communicating progress to our parents on the work that our students are doing. We appreciate all the extra work and staying after to communicate that progress to our parents and stakeholders. We very much appreciate it. I don't have anything else. Anybody else have anything? I hear that some people might be wearing costumes, handing out.
That's a hard no.
Unfortunately, I will not be there, but yes, please visit us downtown trick-or-treating tomorrow, and please go vote. Thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned at 9:15.